Thank you for inviting me to share some of my work and for being here today. I'm speaking from the land of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, South Australia, where storytelling has shaped cultural connections to land for tens of thousands of years. Harry Potter is often framed as an epic tale of good and evil, a coming-of-age narrative unfolding in a supernatural world with magical threats and moral dilemmas. This paper explores how music and sound metaphors operate as musical structures and within cinematic language to co-create depictions of goodness, evil, and resistance across the film series. While all book-to-film adaptations involve reinterpretation and recreation, as theorist Linda Hutcheon observes, the Harry Potter franchise faced a unique challenge. Changing filmmaking teams had to situate each film within both the world of the novels and intratextually from film to film. The result is that each film and the arc of the series as a whole takes on a life distinct from the books. As this slide shows, 5 composer-director pairings, more if we include sound supervisors, brought different sonic perspectives to the evolving narrative, which had to remain legible within the evolving world of the series, a unique challenge for long-form adaptation. Using methodologies from film music scholars such as Claudia Gordman, Anahit Kasabian, and Daniela Kulisic-Wilson, as well as musicologists like Susan McClary and Marianne Smart, I analyze how recurring metaphors in musical language reinforce narrative meaning. Lakoff and Johnson's Metaphors We Live By explains how metaphors shape perception. For instance, time moving past us, or our movement through time. Music theorist Steve Larson, alongside Mark Johnson and Lee Van Handel, explored how metaphor in music evokes motion, shaping emotional response. These frameworks guide my reading of underscore, diegetic music and sound effects, and vocal utterances as sonic metaphors for goodness, evil, and resistance. Across the series, musical themes associated with goodness, often tied to Harry, rely on consistent melodic and harmonic structures. In contrast, the themes for evil change drastically, shifting metaphors, evil as opposition, privation, corruption, or destruction of good. In the first 2 films, John Williams establishes Harry's goodness through 2 leitmotifs, one expressing grief over his parents, the other celebrating new friendships. These themes are simple, diatonic, in major keys with steady triple meters. Unlike Hedwig's magical theme, these motifs evoke the familiar, and their harmonic stability reflects Harry's ordinariness and emotional groundedness. Attached to specific early scenes, like Harry seeing his parents in the mirror of Erised, they reappear across films, creating continuity and reinforcing Harry's human capacity for love. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Williams expands Harry's emotional world through a new, more complex theme. While still diatonic, with a similar up and down contour, it's in a minor mode with wider pitch ranges, irregular rhythms, and varying orchestration. This added musical complexity metaphorically gives weight to Harry's inner world, mirroring his emotional and psychological development. His first appearance aligns with imagery of Harry's parents, but it later expands to broader associations with identity, belonging, and inner strength. While Harry's themes stay largely consistent throughout the films, the music representing evil evolves significantly. In the early films, Voldemort's motifs are traditionally dissonant, chromatic, minor key with jagged rhythms, musical codes for instability and menace. Here is Voldemort's theme, for instance. Here, good and evil are framed as oppositional forces, familiar versus othered, harmonic versus dissonant, stable versus unstable. Prisoner of Azkaban introduces a shift. The Dementor cue avoids pitch and rhythm altogether. No clear key, pulse, or resonant sound. An absence of sound, metaphorically aligning with what David and Catherine Deville call a privation or absence of good. In contrast, Harry's theme transforms into a cue for resistance with full orchestra, French horn section, tolling bells, and choral voices, a metaphor for love as protection. Here, evil isn't the opposite of good, but rather a void where goodness should be.
Expecto Patronum! Expecto Patronum!
In Goblet of Fire, musical metaphors for Harry and Voldemort share DNA. Harry's righteousness or victory theme is a major key version of his emotional theme, ascending, goal-oriented, harmonically resolved. Voldemort's theme mirrors the opening notes, but veers off chromatically, never reaching resolution. The metaphor here is powerful. Goodness follows through. Evil mimics the form, but ultimately falls short. Here are those three themes. The final four films deepen the metaphor. Composer Nicholas Hooper's possession theme, in Order of the Phoenix, tracks Voldemort's slow psychological intrusion into Harry. Its gradual, rhythmically indistinct ascent in pitch mimics the motion of insidious corruption. We hardly know it's there until it's already taken hold. In the climactic battle at the Ministry, pitches representing Harry's identity seem to be pulled down into the texture of the possession theme. Harry resists, creating audible tension until at last his pitches break free, indicated by a sonorous F chord. Evil here is no longer external, but internal, gradually corrupting from within. By Deathly Hallows, there are very few musical cues alongside dialogue, but sound design for the battle with evil evokes the mechanical here and now, metallic sounds of blades, explosions, and relentless full orchestra cues. This aligns with religious scholar Henry Jansen's assertion that evil in Harry Potter is centered in acts of inhumanity, rather than any mysterious transcendent force. In contrast, Lily's theme, a woman's wordless vocalese heard in the final film, evokes transcendence in its cinematic alignments with the resistance against evil. Goodness is portrayed as spiritual and enduring, while evil becomes brutal and grounded. Curiously, Harry's themes for goodness rarely appear during moments of moral decision-making or combat. Often, these moments lack music entirely. In my article, Hearing Written Magic, I argue that the cumulative effect of Harry's musical themes frames our expectations. Even when unscored, we interpret his actions as morally reasonable because we've seen the process of his moral development. This aligns with the work of Aida Patient and Corey Street, who argue that Harry's imperfections retain a sense of righteousness because Voldemort is positioned as a Hitler archetype, an absolute evil. Literary scholar Todd Ide provides copious examples of how real-world political landscapes of the Blair and Bush administrations were increasingly paralleled in Harry Potter's magical world across the series, especially in the sphere that enabled Voldemort's rise to power, including the Ministry and media. There are no doubt many comparisons with the political climates in today's world as well. My recent article, Hearing Written Magic, explores how sound design gives a metaphorical voice to written texts on screen in a meta-relationship between the source material for the films and the resources characters encounter, positioning writing as character and political currency, atmospheric, persuasive, and often ominous, and often signaling the growing presence of evil and the ethical weight of what is read and heard. Music accompanying expanded tiers of informational malintent, such as the Daily Prophet, Dolores Umbridge, and Rita Skeeter, illuminate the control of information that enables Voldemort. So far, we've traced individual themes for Harry and Voldemort, but resistance is rarely a solo act. What happens when we listen beyond the hero-villain binary to consider expanded ranges of characters supporting the resistance against Voldemort? The Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army, and other characters sympathetic to the cause. What do we find when we expand the lens to the music of collective resistance? Sonic metaphors for resistance in the series occur most frequently as disrupted musical forms, that is, the organization of music within itself. While there are many examples of both circumstantial disruption and personal resistance, and some of them are relevant to the topic of good and evil, real-world theorists like Tad Sturmer and Onur Bilginer argue that resistance involves disrupting dominant narratives for the purpose of liberation and requires collective action. These ideas resonate in scenes where sound design breaks from orchestral norms. One early example embodying collective resistance is the Boggart scene in Prisoner of Azkaban, as Professor Lupin coaches students to use humor to disarm fear. Diegetic jazz, often a metaphor for chaos and improvisation, plays on a phonograph. Notably, this is the first time we hear jazz as part of the otherwise classical aesthetic within the magic world. When students are confident, jazz continues. When fear takes over, the score shifts to orchestral underscore, often a metaphor for order, even when the sound is dissonant. Here, the music structure flips the classical expectation of order, disorder, order, suggesting instead disorder, order, disorder as the model for liberatory disruption, as Lupin fosters students' critical engagement and faithfulness to their true self.
Next, Ron. Concentrate. Pace your feet. Be brave. One to the ready, Ron. One to the ready.
Ridiculous.
See? Very good, very good.
Another example comes in Order of the Phoenix when the Weasley twins set off magical fireworks during exams, a comic yet subversive act of rebellion against Dolores Umbridge. For musical context, a montage of Umbridge's controlling actions, including the nailing of proclamation plaques, is accompanied by Nicholas Hooper's schottische-style piece, Professor Umbridge. The light-hearted, orderly music, rooted in 19th century European meters, diatonic melodies, and consonant harmonies, codes her regime as absurdly bureaucratic, using power symbols to mask violence and revisionism with a veneer of tradition. As Filch hammers the decrees into stone, the rhythmic sounds of his boots and nails align with the dance meter. Diegetic noise falls in line with the score. The result is a surreal spectacle that heightens the absurdity of Umbridge's authoritarian control. In the fireworks sequence, in contrast, Hooper repurposes and subverts musical order to underscore student rebellion. The score opens with neat rows of students taking exams, accompanied by a tightly structured reel, A, B, B, C, C, D, D phrases, reinforcing the imposed order. When Fred and George burst in with fireworks, the music erupts alongside the visuals, with fireworks exploding at irregular intervals with the music. The structured music unravels into a frenzy of polyrhythms on expanded instruments as the fiery spectacle drives umbrage out. The music cuts out entirely as proclamations shatter, with breaking glass acting as a metaphorical percussion solo. As the students and staff flood outside, fragments of parchment still in the air, the reel's original pattern returns, now punctuated with polyrhythm, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, reframing rebellion as joyful and restorative, rather than Umbridge's rigid control. It's student agency that the music presents as true order. As we've seen, the Harry Potter films don't merely rely on sound and music for atmosphere. They construct ethical meaning through sonic metaphor. Goodness is not just harmonic or melodic, it's enduring, emotionally grounded, and often wordless. Evil is not a static adversary, but a mutable force, reflecting opposition, absence, corruption, and destruction. Resistance, perhaps most compellingly, isn't always triumphant or tidy, but is often defined by disruption. Like the jazz cue in the Boggart scene or the explosive reel in the fireworks sequence, resistance often emerges through musical disruption of form, authority, and expectation. These choices are not neutral. As sound design breaks from established structures or aligns with cinematic metaphor, it shapes the moral architecture of the films themselves. The oral world of Harry Potter trains us to hear power, integrity, complicity, and resistance in ways that resonate well beyond the fantasy genre. And perhaps that's the deeper magic, that even in a fictional world, sound can teach us to listen more carefully, not just what is said or scored, but to what is silenced, improvised, and ultimately what must be resisted. Thank you.